and good morning, or afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. How's everyone's day going so far? We're going to be doing night skies and galaxies. I'm going to be working on quite a few. You might want to grab a hairdryer because we're going to be using a lot of water today, and it will help with drying times. Now, I try not to use the hairdryer on live because it's loud and I don't want to do that to you guys. So I'm going to be working on a ton of these. Probably about 6 different paintings today. You don't have to do all of them. You can choose to do whatever ones you do. But I can't use the hairdryer, so I'm going to go ahead and start taping these down. We're using a ton of water today, so you want to tape these down. You could do these in a sketchbook, but it's probably going to be pretty warped. You're having a good day? That's good to hear. I'm actually going to put another one on here. On this one too. I'm just going to start taping these down while we're waiting for the actual event time to roll around. This is going to be a live watercolor class. You're free to watch and ask questions or follow along. Try to get those as straight as I can so that they look nicer when I'm done. Anybody have any fun plans after this? Fun plans for your Saturday? Or I suppose it could be Sunday where you're at too. Heading to the lake. Oh, hi. That sounds fun. Do you do anything special at the lake, or do you just hang out? I'm not entirely sure what we're going to do. We're going to play with the waves and make sand thingies. That sounds like fun. My dog loves chasing waves that, well, the lakes here are pretty small, but if there's boats on the lake and they make those wakes, she loves just running and chasing the wake. I would take her to go do that today, but she has a paw injury and she can't get it wet. Too bad. Would be good because she'd probably like to cool off today. All right, we're going to be getting started in about a minute. Going to continue taping this down. You can do the same. All right, I've got mine taped down. Welcome everybody. For anybody who is new, my name is Lacey Walker. I'm the artist behind Rebel Unicorn Crafts, and every Saturday we do a live watercolor class so that you can see how it's done and paint along if you want to. Today we're going to be doing some night sky and galaxy type things. If at the end of this class you want to, I love it if people share pictures with me. You can do that through, you can make a video too, but I know that's kind of sometimes a little bit harder to do, especially if you're watching along. But you can show me your finished results on Instagram, Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts. I'm so happy that you're here. So again, to reiterate, I said this earlier, but I don't know if everybody was on yet. I do try not to use the hairdryer on live because it's so loud. So I'm going to be painting a ton of these. Choose which ones you want to follow along with. If you want to try to paint all of them, that's fine. I do paint pretty fast. But I will be talking through and kind of troubleshooting what I'm doing, and painting that many is going to allow them to kind of dry naturally in between things while I move on to the next one. If you want, you can grab a hairdryer to help speed your drying times. Your drying times are going to be different than mine depending on how much water you use, what paper you're using, and your general humidity level. So I'm using 140-pound Canson paper. So I've taped down mine. We're going to be using a ton of water today, so if we can tape these down, you'll have better results because they will really want to buckle. I am going to be using a mixing well, and I'm going to be using tube paints today. I'm also willing to, if anybody needs me to, I can demonstrate how to mix up some colors with a dry pan set today. But usually when I'm going for these super dark colors, that's when I really want, and large quantities of it, that's when I really want to break out my tube paints. I have all of my wet supplies over here off to the side where you can't really see. It's a little bit hard for me to get everything in frame here. But I do have some water as well as some fresh water. I will also be using a spray bottle in order to transfer clean water into these different wells. I have a paper towel. And then I'm just going to be using a variety of brushes. You're going to want some kind of larger brushes. Whatever you have is going to be fine for these. These are super kind of free form. I've got a size 10, 12, and then I have a mop brush too. So use what you want to, but that's what I'm going to be using today. Also, to do some of the final steps on this, if you want, you can use either some white acrylic paint or some metallic watercolors. These are the ones I'm going to be using today. And I will probably also reach for a white gel pen or a gouache pen to add in some final details. So let's get started by mixing up some colors. We can do this a few different ways, and I probably will do this a few different ways, but I'm going to start by doing my typical ones that are kind of a dark bluish, grayish color, purple, and a bright pink. And then I think some of these we're also going to kind of try to channel the northern lights and do kind of a dark gray black with some bright green and maybe a little bit of blues as well. If you're following along, we're going to start mixing colors now, so go ahead and put some clean water in one of these wells. Depending on your well size, you'll need more or less water than what I have. You're also going to want some tester strips so that you actually know what color things are once we're mixing them up. Since I'm doing so many different paintings, I need to mix up quite a bit of color for each of these because I'm going to be doing this pretty heavy-handed, and I don't want to run out midway through a painting. So I'm going to start with one of my blues, and I'm going to start by just putting a bunch of these blue colors on. I like to usually use more than one blue color to mix a blue, so I'm starting with a cobalt. Let's put some of this Prussian. This will be a really pretty color to put in there. And then I usually mute my blue color by using an orange. I'm going to put a little orange on here too. Alright, I'm going to start by just grabbing a little bit of both of these blues and mixing them in to all that water I put here. Now I put quite a bit of water in here, so I'm going to have to use quite a bit of paint. If you don't want to use as much paint as I am using, do smaller paintings or less of them and smaller quantities of water. Really make sure that you mix this in, especially when you're going into a ton of water like this. It's easy for some chunks to kind of break off and not want to go in. And then here is why we always want tester strips. This looks super duper dark in here. It's not that dark. It really does, the depth of that water kind of captures all that light and sucks it in so you can't see it reflecting. So we always want to double check. We want these to be darker. Your colors can be, let me grab a pencil, I forgot that. You can change your colors so that they're not exactly like the ones I'm mixing up if you either have a different preference or if you have a different kind of set of colors. The only thing that I do suggest is that you match the transparency or opacity level, the saturation level. And basically what that means is if I were to write a word down here and then I paint over it, I want you to be able to see your word about as much as you can see mine. So I still have a little ways to go in actually making this dark enough. So let's go ahead and grab some more of those blues. Just trying to bump up the saturation level. And really mixing in. Because if you're using a round brush like me, round brushes are little magical brushes, and they're almost like a syringe in brush form where they will actually kind of suck in things, including pigment, and so you really want to spread those bristles apart so that it actually gets everything out. I'm going to go ahead and I already know that I want mine to be darker, so I'm going to grab even more. And I mix things in slowly. This is one where if you want to be a little more heavy-handed with your mixing things in, it's a little bit safer because we're going for such dark colors. But in general, I like to mix things in slowly because I find it makes it easier to actually incorporate everything, as well as it makes it easier for me to make minor changes. Alright, so I've added in quite a bit of that blue. Let's see. It is a lot darker. I still want this to be a little darker. Now, we're going to do a slight magic trick, which is taking the color that's on the opposite side of the color wheel, and we're going to mute this blue, but it's also going to have the effect of darkening it a little bit. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of this orange color. We don't want nearly as much blue or orange as we did the blue. Remember, it's easier to add in more pigment than to take it out. So I added in a tip full of that orange, and let's compare it. The color has changed pretty significantly. And then I'm going to grab a little bit more. Do I use Shinhan Professional or Premier? So these are the professional ones. I think the Premier ones are those ones that are really, really expensive. Now, you know, you can invest as much as you want into your supplies, but I use supplies so fast, and since I'm teaching a lot of classes and things that I'm not actually selling, I find that using the professional ones, I think they're really good quality, personally, but I don't sell a lot of my work because I am using a lot of it as demonstration stuff. So I want mine to be a little bit more dark. And I'm going to grab some more of this cobalt. That Prussian blue has a little bit of a greenish tint to it that I want to take down just a little bit. Not a ton. I do like it, but yes, it does. They are expensive, so like this method of mixing. Yeah, you know what's funny is I feel like finding out that you can mix up colors in wells is one of the things that takes the longest to learn in watercolor, and it took me quite a while to actually figure that out. If you're looking for these deep well ones, I've found that you can search for these, sometimes they're called like muffin tin trays. You're interested in learning watercolor but intimidated trying to figure out where to start. I understand that well. Feel free to join any of the lives we have. I do these so that you can paint along, so you can be less intimidated. Alright, I think this is about the color of blue I want, so let's check out the opacity level or transparency level. If I put this over hello, I'm going to suck up a little bit of that extra water. And You can still kind of see the letters, but not really. So that's about how dark you want that color to be. We need to do the same thing. We need to mix up 2 more colors. So I'm going to do a magenta pinkish one as well as a purplish one. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my water in those. And then Core is spelled Q-O-R. And I've gotten mine through Blick, as well as I have bought some of it from Jerry's Artorama too. Where do I buy my brushes? I have bought my brushes from just about everywhere. I find, especially for beginners, I like the Taklon, which are those synthetic bristles. They have just enough give to give you a little bit flow and fun, but they're not so soft that you can't control anything. So I look for a Taklon round brush. All right, in order to mix up our kind of purpley color, we can either take a purple if we have one in our set, or we can mix our own, and I will probably, let's look through what I have in here. Some of my colors are pretty. Yeah, I don't have much violet, so I might mix my own purple color. So we're going to be using more of this cobalt blue. And then, ooh, there's this really pretty Bordeaux color. If I mix these two together, I think this will make a really pretty. No worries, we're going to be doing night skies, galaxies, that type of thing. So here's my taped off paper. I have 7 down, and they range from about 4x6 to 2x3. I've got a bunch of different sizes. I like painting different sizes, so. All right, so we're doing purple now. I'm going to grab this cobalt. And some of this Bordeaux. This Bordeaux is kind of a really, I mean, it does look like a wine type color. I do really like this color, this Bordeaux. It's beautiful. This is not the color I want yet, but just so you can see kind of what it is, it's this, yeah, beautiful color. Let's grab a little bit more of that, mix that in. You could use any sort of a red with a blue. We're just mixing up a purple, or you can go in with if you have a violet. I'm just really low on violet, so I'm trying to save that for when I want to use a pure violet. Since I don't care if this is exactly a purple color, it's okay. I just want it to be purple-ish. So that's a little more blue than I wanted, so let's grab some more of that Bordeaux color. Mix that in. And again, we're going for another dark color. I think that one will be nice. And our final one, we can go for a little bit lighter, which is going to be our magenta color, or our pink color for this one. Again, I think I'm going to throw in some Northern Light-esque ones as well at the end of this. This is my favorite pink. This is the Core Quinacridone Magenta. And you can tell it's one of my favorites because it is quite well loved. Okay. I'm going to wash my brush off to make sure I don't actually have any of that purple in there because I don't want to add any tints of color that are not just this pure, beautiful kind of pinky type color. And let's mix that in there. I want this to be nice and bright and vibrant, but it doesn't need to be so dark that it would cover anything. Let's get a little bit more. Just something bright and vibrant. And I love this color so much that this is one of the only ones that I don't really alter by mixing other colors into it because it's just, I mean, I think it's stunning. Which is, I didn't think I would be so in love with a pink watercolor, because pink is not usually kind of my go-to color for much of anything, but man, I love this. So this is going to be my 3rd pink color. Alright, so I've got a dark blue, a dark purple, and then a bright pink. Now I'm going to grab some of these. Let's actually start with this one. I want to do more of the pinky purpley ones. And I'm going to grab a slightly larger brush. This is a size 12 round brush because I want to be able to put a bunch of this pigment in. And I'm going to start at this top one. So we want these to be real free-flowing, and we're probably going to be painting multiple layers on these to up the pigment level as well. If you want to mute the pink, so pink is basically a lighter reddish color, so you'd want to go for kind of a blue, or not a blue, a green type color. Use a teeny tiny amount though. You love to bleed yellow into the magenta. Oh, I bet that's beautiful. Alright, so for my night skies, when I'm kind of thinking of these as exaggerated night skies where, you know, when you see in sci-fi shows almost where you can see a galaxy up in the sky, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. So what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is block in my lighter colors. So I'm going to actually start with that pink so that it will stand out a little bit more. I'm going to really load my brush up, and I'm just going to kind of go wherever I'm feeling, and I want to get a lot of water on here. A lot of water. You don't want this to dry while you're dipping into your other colors. Then I'm going to actually dip into some of my darker colors, and I'm going to start touching these around the edges of where I put that pink because I don't want it to dry. I'm going to grab some of that purple, and we're just kind of working back and forth, and then we can pull it down. And just let it do its thing. It's going to kind of drip if you want to add even more. If you thought that you got too much in some areas, you can drip. You can pull this down. Just really go for this. Really kind of let it do its thing. And this is the one time where I tell you it's okay to just continually kind of mess with this for a minute. You don't want to mess with it way too much, especially if you have something kind of interesting going. I'm going to put a little more water in my brush. I want to kind of encourage some of these to bleed together, so I'm just going to dip a few of these in here while everything is still real wet. Because I think some of my pinks were a little bit too light. And now I'm going to kind of let some of this drip. I'm going to use the angle of my board in order to kind of control the direction that everything is flowing. And then as usual, so this was technically wet on dry paper. You can wet your paper first, but it will take it longer. It'll dilute the colors you're putting on, so it'll take it longer for it to actually get really pigmented. You'll probably need 3 or 4 layers versus 1 or 2. And as usual, we don't want a ton of this to kind of sit there, so go ahead and be patient and let some of that water drip down, and then use a dried round brush or whatever you have. You could use a paper towel and just suck up a little bit so that you don't have standing water on any of these. Most of these we're going to be doing layers on them, so if your first layer isn't quite what you want, and I can already tell there are a couple areas I don't like a ton on this, but I think they'll be interesting to have underneath another layer, so I'm going to wait. Now, in case you are brand new to watercolor, you'll notice I taped this down not to a desk and to a scrap piece of cardboard. This is actually the back of an old sketchbook where I ran out of the paper, because I can hold it at an angle, which I find a little more comfortable for working, as well as I can control how much of a tilt this has to kind of control the flow of water on here. Alright, so let's do the same thing on all the rest of these. I'm starting with dry paper. You can start with wet paper if you want yours to flow a little more together. And why don't we actually, I will pre-wet this one, just so that you can see what happens when we go onto a wet page versus when we go onto a dry page. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and wet this one, just make sure it's really all over this. And then I don't want there to be too much standing water for this, so I'm going to find a light source. Let's see if I can show you. And you can see how it's super shiny, especially down here. You can't see any of that texture. It's still a little bit too wet. So we want to, ooh, I've got some of that coming from up there into that. Oh well. I want to let this soak in just a little bit until I can start to actually see the texture of the paper. It's drying a little bit too much at the top or too fast, so I can move this around. Because I've just got water in here, so I can do kind of whatever I want. Alright, so now let's find that light source, and you can see the texture of the paper a little bit through. Okay, again, I'm going to wash my brush because I'm going to be starting with that really bright color, and I don't want to have any of my darker colors in it. So I'm going to kind of put in some of this. So we're doing, this one is wet on wet. So I wet the paper first, I put some of that pink in there, and now I'm going to do the same thing where I just kind of drop in some of these colors. And I don't usually wash my brush in between going in between the darker colors, but I do usually wash my brush before going into that pink because I don't want to dilute this beautiful color. So I wash my brush, I'm going to put some more pink in here. And now we need to do the waiting game of sucking up that extra water so that we don't have a ton of standing water. I don't know if you can already tell, but if we go wet on wet, as I kind of said, it will take you longer to go ahead and build up the pigmentation. This one is already quite a bit lighter than this one, even though I use the same colors on it. And that's just because we're diluting the colors when we put them on a wet surface. That doesn't mean it's wrong, we just need to be aware of what's happening. Alright, moving on to this one. Let's put some of that pink. Wash my brush just to make sure. Let's grab some of this purple. And let's go real heavy with this blue at the top so that it really drips down over that. You can do this how you want. Now, if you wanted to, if you're not really liking what's happening, if you don't like the dripping, you could take a paper towel and you can kind of lift out certain areas. I really don't like these paper towels. I bought some, they were supposed to be bamboo paper towels. I was thinking, oh yeah, that'll be better. But they are real dry. They don't do nearly as good of a job as the brawny. But yeah, you can lift, have a play and see what you like doing. Do you like to redistribute the water at the bottom? Do you like to lift it? Do you like to use a paper towel? Do you like it to drip down? What are you kind of like? As you can see, again, we use the same colors and they're quite a bit darker on this one because we went onto a dry piece of paper. Alright, now on this last one, we're going to be using these three colors as well as I'm going to be dipping into my water in order to thin down some of these a little bit so that they're not quite as serious of pigment. So again, wash my brush, make sure I get nice clean pink because that's my favorite. And then I'm going to start dipping into a little water and putting that in a few areas to pull down. I'm just grabbing some water and my brush still has a little bit of that blue in it, but it kind of dilutes it a little bit, which has kind of a nice effect. You can always use your water as an additional color. Again, grabbing that extra water because I don't want, if we let standing water sit here, the top part's going to dry a lot faster than the bottom part, and that's when we're going to get those blooms. Now that can be really beautiful and fun in some circumstances, but we don't typically want that in our night sky. Alright, if you've been following along, a few different things may have happened. Yeah, you can use any sort of a towel you want to. I would find something that has natural fibers, like cotton would be best, but it will probably stain it, so you'd want it to be a dedicated painting towel. Alright, so again, if you followed along, you're going to be looking at these kind of like I am and evaluating if you like them or not. Sometimes something spectacular happens and you think, I don't want to do anything else to it because it is absolutely perfect. But sometimes you're looking at things and you're thinking, I don't really quite like it. It's okay. It could be better. And so I actually really like this one, the one that we did, the wet on wet. I just like that general glow. I can picture some trees down here or some mountains, and I think that would really frame that nicely. I don't know if I want to add anything to this one because I feel like it might not improve it. Now, this one for sure I want to fix because I've got some of those blooms. Now, again, I think those might be kind of pretty underneath, but how they are now, not great. And I will also show you how to remove some of those a little bit too. And then this one where I did some lifting, it got too light there, so I want to change that. That one's also just a little bit flat. This one has potential to be very nice. I'm going to wait and see as it dries. It's still pretty wet, so it will still change quite a bit as we sit here and wait. Now again, we want to, in general, when we're layering with watercolor, you typically want to actually layer on top of a nice and dry layer. These ones don't matter quite as much because we're kind of going for a real free-flowing type aesthetic. So it won't ruin anything if you go onto a slightly damp layer. But you want it to be pretty much dry before you do go onto the second one, or you're not going to actually be adding as much pigment as you think. And part of the reason why I want to add a second layer to this one and this one is I want to darken them. I want to have some where it seems like the light is kind of still teasing us and maybe it's not fully dark, or maybe it's so dark that you can see some of those things more. And then some of these I want to be even just darker. Like I want them to be nighttime. So one way that I check, well, at this point, if I were practicing just on my own, I would grab my hairdryer and I would dry all of these before I either decided if I was doing a second layer or actually moving on. But since, again, I'm not going to be using a hairdryer so that I don't ruin your eardrums, I'm going to just kind of do this feel test where you can tell, like this one's still wet, and especially if I hover the sensitive skin of my wrist over it, I can feel it cool right off of the paper. I'm getting a slight cooling effect on this one up here, but nowhere near as much as this one. So this one I should probably wait a little bit longer, but I'm gonna go ahead and paint over it. Just for time's sake. So again, I'm gonna do basically the same thing. I'm gonna start with my light color, washing my brush just to make sure. And I'm going to kind of put this over this area here. And again, I want this to be super saturated. If I need to, I'm going to put some water. We don't want any of these edges to really dry as we're putting our pigment down. So if we need to add a little water to the edges of them, and then we can add some of these darker colors. Remember, your water can be an additional color by using whatever pigment is already in your brush and then just adding a little water to it. If you want to get rid of these blooms, you can kind of scrub, and if it hasn't set for too long, you'll be able to scrub some of those blooms out. And again, I'm adding quite a bit of just water to some of these colors that I'm adding in here, just to calm them down a little bit. And I'm going to suck up some of that water here. And that one, I think this one's going to look really pretty once I put the stars and things on it, which again, we need to wait for it to dry. grabbing some of that excess water, and I do that just by drying my brush off on my paper towel or towel over here, and then it will just suck up some of that extra water. I'm going to add a second layer to this one. I don't think I'm going to add a second layer to this one. I do like this one. I think this one would be really pretty with some trees, kind of framing parts of this. So let's go ahead and add our second layer to this one. Again, I'm going to wash my brush if I'm going to be adding more pink, which I do want to. Let's grab some of that pink. Let's put some of that purple in there because it was very blue heavy. And put our blue here, grab some water and kind of run these together. I can wash my brush off again if I want to try to pop in some more pink on top of some of these colors. Now is the time to do it while it's still nice and wet. And I can already tell I like this one more than what I started with, so that's perfect. Now, while we wait for these to actually dry, I'm going to move over and do some of the kind of Aurora Borealis type ones. And if you've kind of noticed, when I add a ton of water at the top and then I really rotate this down, it starts to kind of make those ribbons that are very similar to those Aurora Borealis. So we're going to be taking advantage of that. Make sure, in order to do this, you're going to want this on something that you can tilt and kind of control the direction of the water in order to actually get that effect. So go ahead, if you don't already have yours on a sketchbook or something you can do that with, you're going to want to kind of prepare that. I'm going to set this to the side for now because I need these to dry before I can add. Some of these I want to add some trees to, some I want to add more details of the sky to, but they do need to be completely dry before I can do that. So I'm going to set these to the side. And I've got a new set here. And as we kind of mentioned, we want these to have, the Aurora Borealis usually has some like really vibrant greens, maybe a little yellow, and some blues. So let's mix up some more colors. This yellow green I have is a beautiful color and perfect. Oh, feel free to watch. Yes, you can go ahead and watch this class either if you want some inspiration, if you want to follow along, if you just want to hang out, any of that is fine. And I will be posting these, I post my lives a day or two afterwards onto YouTube so they can live, and if you are watching and you want to try later, you can. So I'm going to grab some of this yellow green. Let's check. We want this to be a nice bright color. If you really want to bump up the color of your sky, you can always use a Payne's Gray or something like that. I just typically like to try to create my own dark colors because I feel like they have a little more vibrancy, but sometimes using a Payne's Gray or a black is what you need to do to get an effect that you like. Alright, so I've got a nice bright green color. I also want a nice bright teal color, and I wonder if I have this in here. I have this peacock green color that would be absolutely perfect for this, but I don't know if I have any left. Let's try to find it. If not, we'll make one. I do have a Viridian, which would get us part of the way there, but the peacock green almost on its own would be just absolutely perfect. But I may have used all of it because I really like that color. Alright, I'm not seeing it, so we're going to have to kind of make our own peacock green color. Oops. Start by dumping a bunch of that out. Mixing color from pan colors. Sure. Let's go ahead and mix our kind of tealish color I want to throw into the Northern Lights aesthetic. Let's do it from a pan set. Maybe we'll do it from two different pan sets because, whoops, bumped my workspace. Technically, this dried pan set is all of these ones. Oh, rest up. I'm glad that you were able to get your vaccine, but I know it makes you tired, so rest up. Technically, all these colors here are these ones. These ones I just put into these, and they are dried, so, you know, they're the same. So I grabbed this one and another set. We're going to mix up two different colors. So let's go ahead and show you how to do this. Okay, got my pan set. First thing I want to do, you can do this with a pipette or even your brush, but just drip a little water onto each one of these so that you can actually kind of start getting these activated so that they're ready to go when you want to use them. And then I'm going to, the same thing. You can use the sides of your wells here, or you can switch over to one of these. I like to mix into these because I feel like, well, they're better wells, basically, so they don't drip into each other. I do use these, obviously, quite a bit. You can even see I've done some mixing in these. But if I'm doing these bigger ones where I'm doing lots of colors, I like to go ahead and just use these pans to mix things. All right, so now while I was blabbering along and the colors I wet them down, they've kind of sat and that water has soaked into them a little bit so that they are, yeah, they're easy to get into. Yeah, I had the Pfizer one too, and it was not great on that second one, but it did go by real fast, so that was nice. Not like an actual cold. All right, so I've got a damp brush here. I have pre-wet these, and then kind of similar to how we do the tube paints, instead of dipping into the little bits that we've put on the side, we're just going to grab some of the color. I've got Viridian in my brush here, and I can put it right into this well. I'm going for kind of a nice bright teal color. Now again, I mean, you can see I have not done a great job of this, but if you have a dried set, in general, you want to try to wash your brush off before grabbing other colors because they do kind of stain on them. I'm going to grab some of this light green, this yellow green in here, because I want to brighten that green up. And then I'm going to wash my brush again. And now, because I want this to be kind of a tealish blue, I'm going to dip into, this one is phthalo blue here. Maybe a little bit more. Even more. And if I'm having trouble getting that color, just put a little more water in there. Grab a little bit more. Again, I'm kind of moving slow, similar to how I do this with tube paints, because I don't want to shoot way past kind of my target. And that's where I'm at now. I want this to be a little bit more blue. I'm going to wash my brush off. And I'm going to grab, this is cerulean blue. And see, I'm just kind of twisting my brush around in here to really get that into those bristles. So I don't have an affiliate link yet for those deep well ones. I should try to find one. I think I bought mine from an art store in person. And I know that my friend Andrea found a set of those muffin tin pans from Blick. But thank you for asking. I should look into that. I want this to be a little bit more blue. Just a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. Okay. Yeah, I think that's the color I want for that other one. And then let's go for a really bright blue, but I'm going to do it from a different set so that we have some different colors. I bought these a while ago and I have not used them very much. This was from that Stuart Simple. It's supposed to be the coloriest colors. I don't know if they are the coloriest ones I have, which was a little bit disappointing, but just to show you that you can do kind of the same thing with any of these sets, let's go ahead and mix up a bright blue. So I'm going to wet some of my blue colors here. And again, I'm going to put some water in these wells here. Wash my brush. And then let's go for some of these super bright blue colors and just mix them into the water we've put there. I'm going to grab some of this one too. Let's see, do I know where I don't have the color guide there. Otherwise I could tell you what colors these are. I seem to have misplaced it. Just grabbing some of these blues, and I'm not being super careful on these since I don't actually use these that often. I should be careful, but I can always wipe them off. So I have Paul Rubens, their metallic colors, but I don't have their normal colors. Ooh, I got a little bit of the red in there. I don't really want that. Let's mix a little bit more in here. And there we go. So for the next one we're going for is kind of our Aurora Borealis inspired one. And so we have mixed up, we have 6 colors on our palette now. Oh good, I'm so glad this is helpful. So we have 6 colors that we've mixed up. These 3 here, or well, these 4 I mixed up using my tube paints. And then this one I mixed up using my dried tube paint, so it's technically the same. And then this one I used a different dried pan. So you can use these wells to mix from dried pans. And if this was something that was not obvious to you, you were not alone. I feel like this took me a year to figure out when I started painting, that I could do this with the dried paints too. The big difference between dried and tube paints is it doesn't take quite as long to get a ton of saturation of a color with the tube paints because you don't have to like constantly re-wet things, but you can do the same things with the 2 different ones. So for our Aurora Borealis one, if you wanted to, you could use black, but I think I'm going to use a little bit of these 2 and then these 3 here. Again, remember, if we want to get those ribbony type things, we really want to have this taped down onto something where we can actually control the angle at which we're holding it, so we know how we can change the way things are dripping. And these ones do usually take me a little bit of time to kind of, especially the Aurora Borealis ones, kind of dial them in, so I might need to tape some more down. So you might want to watch this before trying. I mean, if you think you've got this, go for it. But I feel like every time I do this, I have to kind of relearn the technique a little bit. So if you want to wait for a second, you might want to consider that. All right, so starting here, dry paper. Starting with my dry paper, I'm going to grab some of this really bright color. I have washed my brush to make sure I'm not diluting this color because I want really bright colors. If you don't, it's totally fine. Putting quite a bit of this. I'm going to put a couple different colors here, and then maybe even a little more of that green. Grabbing some of these darker colors because I want this to be a real night sky type scene. And I'm putting this on the top here. And then I want these to really start to flow down. That's going to give us kind of those ribbony type effects. While this is still pretty wet, we can kind of come in here and try to define some of the bottoms of those Aurora Borealis types. And then I've got a ton of water here, so I need to suck up some extra. This one's not bad. We've got some of that effect in if I actually kind of framed this right with some trees or things like that. That would be pretty good. But you can kind of see how we want those dripping effects to kind of help us create the ribbony effects. I'm going to set this here because I kind of like how those have started to fall. I don't want them to be more extreme, so I'm going to let it sit flat to kind of chill out for a second before I actually pick it back up again or start working on another one. Okay, let's see what happens if I pick it up now. We lost a little bit of that, but that's okay. Now, at this point, you can really see the different areas that are dry versus wet. So this is the time where I don't like to add a bunch more color in because it gets a little bit tricky. And because there are different areas of dryness here. And it's just kind of a time when it's a little bit more scary to do that. So, all right, I'm gonna just let that kind of do its thing while I move on to this one. And again, I'm gonna start with I wash my brush, and then I'm going to start with this light green color, and I'm gonna put this right at the top here. And then I'm going to grab this super dark blue and I'm going to pull this down. And let's actually put a little bit of those other colors up here and grab that dark color and pull it down. So the paper I'm using is Canson 140-pound paper. And the brush is well, I'm going to call it a mystery brush because I'm working on something, but it is a Taklon bristle size 12. Okay. That one would look kind of neat with some trees. This one will probably need a second layer. And let's do this one more time here. So, I'm going to work a little different on this one, just to try one more thing. I want that Aurora Borealis to kind of be a here-ish, so but I want there to be a lot of darkness at the top of this. So I'm actually going to start by putting some of my super dark color up here. This is a little different than what I normally do, and I'm actually going to grab some of that purple too because I want that in there. Then I'm going to wash my brush a little bit, put some straight water here, wash my brush completely, grab some of that bright green color, put that in a couple areas, pretty heavy, maybe a little heavier here, and then let's pop in a couple of these other colors that we mixed up just so that we have them in here. And then again, I'm going to grab my dark colors and I'm going to kind of pull these down. Just grabbing just the edge of them. Dark colors. Ooh, yes. That one is developing how I want. There we go. Yes, this one kind of has the magical feeling I was going for. And again, I'm just sucking up that extra water at the bottom. And now these ones need to chill out before I can do anything else to them. I probably will add a second layer to most of these, maybe even this one, just because I want to brighten it up, but this is the definite shape I was going for and kind of layout, so cool. Again, I'm going to set this to the side and I'm going to grab those first ones we worked on to kind of look at them and see if we want to add details, if any of them do need a third layer, or what we want to do to them. So here are the first ones, and I think I'm going to keep these ones as they are. We have a few different options on what to do with them. We can add mountains. All right, you guys can vote. Mountains, trees. You want to do the trees with pins? Do you want to keep it just as a night sky and add like a moon? What do you want to do? We can do a couple different things. So let me know in the comments if you have any preferences. Mountains and trees. Okay. Oh. Moon and stars. Okay, we got a bunch of different things going on. On the top one, let's do some mountains. So now I'm running out of wells here. I still want all these colors, but I'm gonna grab, because I think I'm gonna add another layer to at least some of those other ones. I don't want to get rid of that pink yet, or can I get rid of the pink? I can get rid of the pink, okay. So, in order to grab this pink, I'm just going to take some of my paper towel and just suck this up because I'm not going to be using this pink color anymore. And then I'm going to put some water in here. Now, this didn't get completely clean, but that's alright because we're going to be really kind of using this color, which is much darker, and diluting it. So the very first thing we want to do is remix this color. This is our super dark blue color, and this is the color I'm going to use as the basis for my mountains. And we want that dark color here, but we want a diluted version over here. So I'm going to put a couple, ooh, that was kind of cool. That hurts you, removing the pink. Ooh, but that's pretty. Look at that. I could watch that for way too long. And let's just mix that into that water. Yeah, usually if I have a bunch of color mixed up like that, I will let them dry in these wells. And even after class, I let these dry, and then I will usually paint something with my extra paint. But, you know, while we're in class, sometimes I gotta move a little bit faster so that you guys can actually see. So, this is a pretty light color compared to what we've got going on here, but I'm going to do kind of a combination of layering and lifting to create my mountains and kind of carve them away from here. So in order to do my mountains, I'm taking this diluted color, diluted version of this. I'm going to really put this in my brush, and I want this to be pretty much dry. Well, I want it to be dry, but at least most of the way. And then I'm going to actually paint my mountains over this. So take advantage of the shapes of what you have. I really like what's going on over here, and it's a little boring over here. So maybe my mountains will come up over here, come down, and then come up a little bit to kind of frame this area. So take a look at what you have, and then as we do this, we kind of want to, because our background is so dark, we want to do a combo of kind of lifting and adding in color. So you can see I'm painting it, trying to make sure none of my edges other than the top one dries. But instead of just painting real quick, I am kind of doing a lifting motion and moving that paint around, which is going to remove at least a little bit of that background area. Oh no, I went into the really dark color. Wash my brush, go fast, go into that diluted color. And let's bring that up here too. And again, I kind of want to build, but I also kind of want to lift. So while this is still wet, I'm going to grab some of that pigment from the tops of those mountains because it's going to kind of help define that top area and separate it a little bit from the actual sky there. So that's our first layer of mountains. I don't want to do anything else to this. At this point, I want this to dry. So let's go ahead and let's add mountains to one more of these. Let's do it to this one. Let's do it to a lighter one. Or should we do it to this one? Let's do feeling. I think this one. This one, okay. Taking that lighter blue, and again, I'm going to kind of look at what's happening here and take advantage of what I want to highlight. Now this one is lighter, so I don't really need to carve any of that out because I can clearly see it. You can if you want to, or, well, now it's disappearing, so maybe we need to grab a little bit more and re-emphasize. And it might actually be doing this where it's kind of bleeding away from it and really kind of going into the background, because this one might still not be dry enough. I probably should have used a hairdryer on this, but you know, that's kind of the story of this class, is hairdryer would be helpful. Okay, so now if we want to add trees to stuff, because I want to add more layers of mountains, but I need to wait and let those kind of chill for a minute and soak in and dry. But we have two different options when we want to paint trees. The first is we can use watercolor. We could use a black watercolor. You can mix up your own color. You could use what you want. The second is we can actually use a pen. And you can either use something that's special for watercolor, or if you wait until it's completely dry, you can just use pretty ordinary pens. And if you're looking for a good budget pen to use on the top of dried watercolor, I really like this one. It's just a Papermate felt tip pen. It's got a really nice dark color. So I'm going to show you how to make trees in two different ways. On this one, I will be using a pen, and on this one, I will be using watercolor. So let's start with pen. Again, we want to make sure that this is completely dry before I do this. And we also want to take advantage of what the watercolor is giving us or what we want to hide. I don't really like these really light colors here, so I'm going to make sure I put some trees over there. So, in order to draw my trees, this is dry. I am doing this with a Papermate felt tip pen. I'm going to just start by defining where my trunks are. This is the hardest part, is actually just making those first marks. Now I'm thinking of these as kind of shadows of trees. And then I just touch at the top to kind of hint to the fact that there are some of those boughs up there. And then I start to kind of scribble down. We want to scribble so it gets a little bit wider. Now remember, we are emulating nature, and nature is very natural and things happen. So maybe you have a little gap. Don't try to make it too regular, because nature has some irregularities to it. Things like maybe there were high winds and a branch fell down. Maybe there's a little bird's nest here that's weighing that down. And we can add as many trees as we want. Maybe we want a shorter one here that's pretty close. And maybe we want a taller one over here that's kind of going off frame. This one I think I will also be adding like a shooting star or a moon or something too with a white gel pen. There's a ton of ways. Now technically if we had pre-prepared, I don't typically like to prepare the night skies with masking fluid or something, because you can't always entirely control what's going to happen or what's going to be spectacular about what happens with the night sky behind it. So I will, you could mask off an area and have a really defined moon or something, but I kind of like to let it do its thing. All right, so that's how you add trees with pen. Now if I wanted to add trees with watercolor, I'm going to actually, you could do this with paint tube, but I'm going to move this so I don't spill this. I might spill it. We'll find out. And I'm going to grab my dry pan here. And I'm actually going to be using my Payne's Grayer Black just because I like these to be pretty simple. I'm going to move over to using a slightly smaller brush. It's not much smaller. It's a size 10. And I'm just going to grab some of that Payne's Gray. And at first I want this to be a little diluted because I will probably actually do 2 layers of trees to kind of show that maybe there are some off in the distance. Let's grab a little more water in my brush. Let's Let's check, and that's about what I want for my first layer of trees. And for this, we just want to, we're kind of hinting to the tops of trees here. So just use the tip of your brush to kind of define where this forest might start. And we just want the tops. We're kind of just showing the shadows of this. And then we can bring this down. You might find a different way that you like to add trees or details as well, but this is how I like to do it. Well, thank you so much. That's very nice to hear. Okay, now, again, we're in the waiting game stage because I need these to dry, and then I need this to dry in order because I want to do a second layer of those trees to kind of show some depth. And I need all of those other things to be taken care of before I can flick paint on all of these. You can technically flick paint at this point too, but because I'm working on a couple different sets here, I'm going to grab the other one and we can do some evaluation. Okay, so here's where they have kind of dried, and again, kind of feeling, I'm not actually touching the paper, I'm just feeling for coolness to see. I want this one to be brighter with the yellows. I think I'm going to leave this one. There are some parts that I don't super duper love on this one, but I think I can cover those up with some mountains and things like that. And then this one, I don't know. This one I feel like needs something. So I'm going to work on these two. I'm going to leave this one as it is. Alright, so I'm going to do kind of similar to this one where I actually started with my dark color up here. Putting quite a bit there. Let's hint to a little purple just to give it a little variation. Let's get a lot of water in our brush and move that down. Wash our brush. I'm going to grab this bright orange, or why do I keep wanting to call this orange? Green color. And let's pull that down. Let's even put some of this tealish color before moving back into this dark color and pulling that down. See if that helped a little bit. I feel like the Aurora Borealis ones, they either work super well or they don't work very well. Okay, let's do this one over here. I'm going to keep this one nice and light, starting with this color here, the green. I'm going to grab some of this other blue and maybe even a little of this teal here. And then I'm going to grab my dark blue color and pull this down. I want to encourage this to run, maybe even put a little bit here. Encourage that to run into that a little bit. Okay. If we need to, we can encourage some of those waves. I like them to develop on their own, but it's not super happening, so I'm going to hint to them a little bit while this is still nice and wet. Okay. Now at this point, again, I would probably wait for some of this to dry, but I want to make sure we actually get through all this. So this next layer of my mountains might be a little bit fuzzier than I would typically want, but I want to make sure we get through this. So washing my brush, drying it off, remixing my super dark blue, and adding a brushful or two into my diluted blue color. Checking it, so I think this was our first one. It is a little bit darker. And I'm going to make another layer of mountains here. Again, we're doing a combo, since we're going on such a dark background, we're doing a combo of painting and lifting. And you can kind of see where on some of mine that top part is not super defined, and that's just because this is not dry enough. Okay. Now, let's actually combine the mountains and the trees on this one. And I think that this other tree layer is dry enough to go ahead. I'm just using my black. I'm gonna add quite a bit of that black to this. Let's make sure this is a darker color. You could add some other colors to this if you wanted, maybe even a pretty viridian or something like that, but I'm gonna just go with the black for simplicity's sake. And I'm gonna actually put a little forest here, so maybe it comes up a little bit. And down. I'm just using, we want to use the shape of our brush to our advantage before we actually pull this all the way down. There, now we've got trees and a mountain. Yes, you absolutely can use a hairdryer. I just try not to because it's so loud. I don't know how to mute this as I'm working, so now I'm going to add a second layer with that dark color of these, and I typically want to change at least one thing between layers so that I'm not just following the layer before it. It can have a similar fall to it, but I find it looks a little better if you at least vary it a little bit. And there's another layer of that forest. Okay, now typically I would do, yeah, I could tell you that, but I don't know how many people have the ability to mute it and things like that, so I'm just gonna wait. I typically would do about 3 layers of things just because I like to work in threes, but I am getting a little bit close on time here, and I want to get all of these together. So, all right, I think on this one, what do we think on this one? Trees or mountains? Let me know. These two are still too wet in order to do anything to. Trees. All right, I think the trees have it. So I've got my black here. We have an enthusiastic mountains. All right, so I've got my black here. I've got some blue over here. I feel like just throwing a little blue into this black just to kind of spice it up a little bit. And part of what I'm demonstrating here is just showing you there are so many ways to do basically the same thing. If you don't do something the exact same way as me, that's totally fine. Maybe you found a better way to do it, at least for you. Okay. Let's add some trees here. So again, I want to take advantage of kind of the shapes this is giving me. Don't want any part of this to dry too much. Before I move on, or we're going to get some unevenness. It's okay. We'll probably put a second layer on this one as well. Ooh, yeah, I like that. Hi, Frida. All right. Oh, yes, this really made that really look like the Aurora Borealis. That's perfect. Or I really like it. Okay, so next, I'm going to set these things to the side because I will be doing some more layers on the Aurora Borealis ones. But next, I want to actually add in some stars. So set that to the side. This next part gets a little messy, so you should make sure that whatever you're working on, it's okay if a little paint gets splattered on it. If you need to grab like a paper towel or something to cover stuff, we shouldn't be using way too much. Not too much should be happening, but there will be little specks of this because we're going to be splattering paint. Here are the metallics I'm going to be using. I bought these on Amazon for like $10 a couple years ago, and I'm finally getting pretty low on some of these colors, but they have lasted forever. Okay, I'm going to grab my spray bottle with clean water, and I'm going to put quite a bit of water in each of these because I want to make sure there's a lot of this available. Now I've got two brushes here I'm going to be using for flicking. Something with these smaller bristles is going to give us a really thin splatter. Something with these bigger bristles is going to give us bigger drops. Now, the other thing that this is totally up to you. You can splatter your stuff so it goes over your mountains and things, or this is another really good use for your scraps, is you can actually kind of tear them to create shapes that are going to help you cover. Like I don't want stars on my mountains. You can have stars on your mountains, that's totally fine, but I typically don't want them, so I'm going to actually kind of cover the bits that I don't want there to be that spray on. So I'm going to go ahead and cover some of these areas. Let me find some more scrap paper. Dig a little bit through my pot of scraps. I'm even going to put these over my trees a little bit here. Just covering everything that I don't want to accidentally splatter paint on, like that. So this, you have a black hole in your sky. Hey, it's a feature. Alright, so now this looks like quite a mess, but it's an intentional mess, so I'm going to go ahead and grab, first I'm going to do a fine spray. Take whatever color you want. I'm going to start with this one. This one looks nice. This is, if I were naming this other than 901, I would call this something like a champagne color. I'm going to put quite a bit in my bristles, and then I'm just going to take this and flick it. Okay, I'm running out. I need a little bit more. I don't know how well you guys can see that. I can see it pretty well, but it is nice and shiny. I'm going to wash my brush off here. I'm going to wait for just a second for that to kind of hang out. And alright, now I'm going to go in, let's go in with this one. A toothbrush works really well for flicking paint too. If you don't have metallic watercolors, you can take you can do a couple things. You could add in your stars individually, or you can take some white acrylic paint and thin it down enough to where you'll be able to put it in your brush and flick. Okay, let's grab some of this gold. Ooh, that is so pretty. And then flick. I already love it. Okay, Now I'm going to carefully remove these so that we can actually see, and then I can hold this up to the light so you can see what that did. I would maybe go for another layer. Maybe not. I don't know. I like some of these a lot. Okay, let's see if we can... Oh, now you can see it. Okay. I'm going to let this dry for just a minute because I'm going to be adding in some moon type stuff and maybe even a little shooting star and things like that using a white gouache pen in a minute, but I want to let that metallic have a chance to just like chill out and not be super wet while I'm using my pen on it. And in the meantime, we're going to do another layer of these trees. So I want another really dark, probably going to grab black to do another layer here. Yes, my YouTube channel is Rebel Unicorn Crafts. And I am trying to build up a better, selection of tutorials. I already have some there, and in general what I'm trying to do is I make a really simplified, shortened one on TikTok, and then I will usually expand on that on my YouTube channel so that you have, if you want to like take a little more time to do it. Okay, again, I'm going to add in another layer of these trees. If we need to, if you messed up on your first layer, make sure you just put some trees over it so that you can't see your mistake. It's kind of the beauty of adding details and trees and things like that is you can fix what happened before it. Now, I can really see the depth between those two. I don't know how well that's coming off on the camera, but in person that looks quite nice. Okay. You're up to your ears in freshly picked blueberries and cherries. Oh my gosh, that sounds so good. Maybe you should paint some blueberries and cherries too. Alright, so I am going to tell you guys, because I am getting a little low on time and I want to make sure I finish off at least the other ones. I think what I'm going to do with this one is leave this one as it is for now. So this is the last you're going to see of this one in class. Because I want to do a couple things. One, I kind of want to see what you guys do with the Aurora Borealis type one. So let me know, send me pictures, I want to see what you do. But the second is maybe I can actually use these to make a little TikTok video so that we have a really short tutorial showing how to add some of these end details on. Yours looks like a child painted it. Oh, I doubt that. I really, really doubt that. But I will also say, once you actually, if you taped yours down, once you take the tape off and you get the nice clean edges, it will bump it up. And yeah, also, we're all here, we're all learning, even I was learning a little bit during this class, so, and, every once in a while you have a bit of a flail time, and it's okay. Alright, let's do a couple fun things to the skies here. I think I'm definitely adding a moon to this one. I thought about adding a moon to this one, but I kind of think that I just like the simplicity of this. I think it would look really cool with a shooting star, though. So this is a white gouache pen. You can do this with a normal white pen. You can do this with white acrylic paint and like a Q-tip, or not a Q-tip, a toothpick. But this is what I'm going to be using. Let's just make sure it's working. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in some white stars by just putting in some dots. I'm going to hint to the fact that, oh look, it's the Big Dipper. Just put in some more stars. And And let's actually put in a shooting star. I want it to be just about here. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to lightly and dramatically kind of pull that. And I really love how that super small detail just kind of pulls that together. Oh yeah, I totally understand that. Sometimes you just want to paint to just paint and it doesn't need to be anything. That is one of the reasons why I like doing these little mini ones, is you can paint a whole bunch of them and you just kind of get into a groove. And some of them might not turn out great, but maybe you'll have one or two that you just think, wow, I don't even know what happened. That's gorgeous. And they're kind of fun like that. All right. So this one, I think I want a moon here. I'm just going to take this white gouache pen and I'm just going to make kind of a circle. And then I'm going to tap it. I use my fingers a lot when I'm painting things that are not watercolor. And I'm just going to kind of squiggle and tap a little bit because I want there to be, I'm not using normal paint, but I want there to be some variation in the colors here. And tap. And we're kind of getting the effect of a little bit of a moon there. Oh, yeah, I kind of like it like that. Maybe let's add in just a couple little stars. And maybe a little bit brighter in just a couple areas. When I get really focused, I feel like I start to talk really quiet. All right. Anyway, so there's a little moon. Let's also do a little half moon one. I feel like this one would look kind of pretty with a half moon. Maybe somewhere just over here. Let's just do a little sliver moon. And again, I'm going to take a clean finger and tap. Don't super love the placement of that, but I've put it there, so I'm just going to go with it. So a couple years ago, for my husband's birthday, I bought him a telescope because we're both kind of space nerds. I mean, he literally went to school. He's not this anymore, but he went to school for aerospace engineering, and so he really likes space. So I bought him a telescope. And one of my favorite things that we've seen with the telescope is when you look at the moon when it's not completely full, and you really see in that zoom, this area where it is dark versus the light, you can really see all those craters, and it is just stunning. Okay, so we made a little sliver moon. Not super crazy about that one. I kind of wish I hadn't done that. It probably would have been better over here, but that's what I did, so I have to live with it for now. And let's just add a few more stars here. And I just kind of like the simplicity of this one, but I do think I want to add just a couple bright stars. Remember to vary kind of the placement of the stars. Some of them are going to be really close together, some of them are going to be further apart. Be intentionally random about the way you put these, and it'll look a little bit nicer. Okay, so that pretty much concludes today's class. I will keep these other ones here to do some additional details and have just a video where we can kind of go back to it. But I do have just a few more minutes, so if you have any final questions, please let me know. Anything about today's class or about watercolor in general. And also, please, please, I would love to see any of the pictures you paint today. It really brightens my day to see what you've done, you know. And maybe if you're still learning and you're self-conscious about it, try to give yourself at least one compliment in there. Find something you like about what you did today. All right, gouache versus gel pen. I have both. This one is a gouache pen. This one is a gel pen. On this black here, here is the white pen. This is the gel pen. And scribbles. I find that this white gouache pen covers way better and is brighter. But that's just my experience, and this might not be the best gel pen that there is. So if you have a good white gel pen, totally use it. I just find that this gouache one has a little better coverage. So I do often also use just white acrylic paint on top of my watercolors to add some of these details in. I have also used, I have some paint pens like this that you can use. You know, a Posca marker would work good. Silver Sharpies could be good on this too. Kind of just, you know, whatever you have. Find something fun to put on top. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up for me. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you again next week. Of course, you're very, very welcome. Zig Painty Metallic is great too. Ooh, cool. Good tip. Thank you, thank you. Have a good day.